on another Monday night, and I know why you did. Dr. Will Tuttle is here. I'm very excited about that. So, okay. Dr. Will Tuttle, who? Okay, so I get his book, like everybody else. I get his book, The World Peace Diet. This is earlier this year, and I'm looking at it, and it says, and I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if he could do a Monday Night Live? And I'm perusing the book, and then it says, lives in Healdsburg, California. And I was on the internet immediately, where he so kindly had a phone number posted. And turns out it's a 707 number, but he no longer lives in Healdsburg. He's been living in an RV for the last 15 years, traveling. But I called him, told him what opening I had, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll be in Santa Rosa right then. So it was just perfect, and he was excited and open to doing it, which is how we like him here. So Dr. Will Tuttle, let me just read his little bio. Little, hardly. Okay. Acclaimed pianist, composer, educator, and author, has lectured and performed widely throughout North America and Europe. His doctorate degree from the University of California, Berkeley focused on educating intuition in adults, and he's taught college courses in creativity, humanities, mythology, religion, and philosophy. He is a recipient of the Peace Abbey's Courage of Conscience Award and is a Dharma master in the Zen tradition. Devoted to cultural healing and awakening, he has created 7 CD albums of original piano music and also his groundbreaking Amazon #1 bestseller, The World Peace Diet. He's with us tonight to share his ideas on nutritional sanity with a talk of the same title, Dr. Will Tuttle.
Thank you so much, Shea. It's really fabulous to be here. How's everyone doing? Doing well? Great. It's very touching for me to be back in Healdsburg after being away for 15 years on the road traveling. And we actually, a lot of the albums that I made originally, we made up on right off of West Dry Creek Road where we used to live. It's a really powerful place, and I am just so glad that you're interested in the idea of eating for world peace. I'd like to talk about some of the main ideas that I think our culture must discuss if we are going to be able to have a continuing evolution of consciousness on this planet, of human beings anyway. And yeah, thanks for saying that. Nutritional sanity. You know, Krishnamurti said, it is not a good idea to be well adjusted to a sick society. And I think this is a really profound statement that all of us, when we're born into this culture, we naturally, as little children, want to fit in. We naturally eat whatever our parents give us. And as we grow up and continue on in our lives, we continue to most of us anyway, want to fit in and be like everybody else. And that means eating the food that everyone is eating, which is really a disaster. But I think there's an underlying drive in all of us to awaken spiritually and to live a life that makes a difference in terms of authentically contributing to the healing of our planet and our culture. And what I've discovered, I believe, is that the food choices that our culture forces on all of us from the time we're born is really the driving force behind the problems that we have as a culture and that we're not able to solve. How many of you who are in here have done research into our culture's food system and the sort of what's behind the curtain of this food system? Some of you have looked into yeah, okay, good. Some of you probably don't want to hear about it. It's pretty disturbing. But it's really empowering also, I think, to understand what's happening. Over the gate of the old Greek temple at Delphi, there was a saying, Gnathi Suton, which means know thyself. And the underlying message, I think, there is that really it's a timeless spiritual teaching that we will only be happy if we understand ourselves. And what I believe is that we will not really understand ourselves unless we understand the culture that we've landed in and we're living in. And we will not understand our culture unless we understand our culture's practice of food. When I was getting my PhD at Berkeley, I took a lot of courses in sociology and anthropology, and one of the things that people understand basically is that if you want to understand a culture, you look at their food. And if you want to understand the primary way that any culture transmits its essential values and norms and mores from one generation to the next, you look at the food. And looking deeply into our culture's practice of food, I think, is probably the most valuable adventure that anyone in our culture can take in terms of understanding ourselves and understanding whatever difficulties we may be having in attaining happiness and peace and joy and freedom, but also understanding why our culture has such a difficult time attaining what we all profess to want to attain, which is peace and joy and freedom and sustainability and equality and justice. There's no reason for us human beings living on this planet not to be happy, not to be well-fed. There's a system in place that is profoundly unjust in terms of food distribution, and the underlying mentality in our food choices, in our meals, is I believe is this taboo subject that no one's supposed to talk about. But when we start to talk about it and begin to understand it, we'll be actually able to create a culture where peace and sustainability and freedom and justice and joy for all are possible. And the reason is this. In order to participate in the meals that we're all forced to participate as little kids, we must disconnect from a massive amount of violence that's inflicted routinely on other sentient beings. And we don't like to think that it's any big deal. We like to think that, you know, these animals were just put here by God for us to eat, and they taste good, and that's the end of the story. And I remember as a kid growing up, I remember when I was about 7 years old, I was in Concord, Massachusetts, which is where I was born and raised. And I remember asking my mother if whether or not the kind of food we were eating is what everybody ate. You know, and we ate a lot of meat, dairy, and eggs, and typical what we call today the standard American diet. And my mother said, yes, what we're eating is what everybody eats. And I said, really? In the whole world? She said, yep, in the whole world. That's what everybody eats. I said, okay. And then she turned around, she said, well, there are vegetarians. And the way she said it, I knew that they live on another planet. We will never meet one. They're hypothetical people. Where would they get their protein? You know, that was the basic message from my mother, and she was absolutely, totally, completely correct. I never did meet a vegetarian. I never heard another word about it for a decade or more. I grew up and went away to college, and actually, I'll just mention briefly. Well, I don't know if I'll mention that. It's kind of maybe not. I won't mention it. There's this. You know, some of you are eating. Maybe I'll mention it later. So I went away to college. I started hearing about vegetarians. You know, that there were some around on this campus in Maine where I was at Colby College. This was in the early 1970s, and I read a book called Cosmic Consciousness by a fellow named Richard Buck. He wrote it back in the 1890s, and he basically said most human beings attain self-consciousness, which is basically just caring about myself, kind of the normal self-centered consciousness. But he said some people have attained what he called cosmic consciousness, which is this quantitatively higher level. People like Jesus and the Buddha and great sages, both men and women, and